Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's the Jacked Up Review Show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. It's a Jacked Up Review Show. Jacked Up Review Show.
Oh, and here we are with the horror hosts. I can't speak today. Let me try that again. Here we are with Daniel and I are discussing our notable horror hosts that we grew up watching on TV or just came to know later in life. And
For your
they-
approval.
well, I don't have to prove shit. I just whoever we want to talk about that we just feel is very influential, very fun to talk about. And so first off, when did you start getting into horror hosts? Watch those kinds of shows and
Officially, it would have to have probably been high school with Joe Bob Riggs on Monster Vision on TNT, because he's just so awesome, and how could you not love him?
right.
But unofficially, all the way back to my boyhood, because every year, coming up New Year's Eve, I would watch the Twilight Zone marathon on TV, and Rod Serling, man, he is like the penultimate horror host.
I'm glad you brought that up. I had him like listed like number 8 on the list, but yeah, I think he's definitely the most common host who not only is instantly recognizable just because he was not only just the host but the creator, a head writer and producer, but I think he's also interesting because you look at so many other hosts, they definitely, even if they're not hosting a show like that, even if it's just a simple anthology, they definitely inspire how they walk and posture and, enunciate off his stature,
You know, like every attempt that I have seen at Twilight Zone reboots or new ones, just it's not the same without him, and no one can match just that style and that type of delivery. He's iconic.
That's pretty much the main issue, and nowadays most of them would just play it safe and just say, let's just have a narrator who's got an iconic voice like Peter Graves, and it's like, okay, well,
That's about the closest you're gonna get. Is just a narrator with a really great voice. Because
Richard Basehart, somebody. I think he's also. It's also missed that many anthology shows, let alone just block hours. The closest you get, even then, just everyone's been kind of just mainly imitating the MTV style, where you have bumpers,
Yeah.
moments, little storylines going in between for people hosting in between shows, and that's about it. And unfortunately, some of those get just very nauseating because, we're in the day and age where people are giving up cable, or they just, if they can't TiVo and just fast forward, they don't want to watch it anyway. So because it's just gotten that irritating and off topic to where it's like, what are these people even talking about? I'm missing something.
I would not go back to VHS because, let's face it, today's viewing quality is better in terms of the sound and the picture, but there was something interesting with that experience of if it's a horror host you really love, or hell, any host you really love, you actually got to rewind just a couple seconds to get what the hell they said during the bumper.
Exactly. And it has been interesting seeing how that show has been remastered for CBS, because you can totally tell which ones are the remastered old VHS tapes from like the 80s and 90s, and which ones are definitely from the vault, just The playback just shows. You can tell it's just like, wow, that looks rather digital. Oh, because it is digitally remastered. It looks like it's going at 30 or 50 frames per second as opposed to 20. 24 frames. So going back to even Joe Bob, I'm not really crazy about the new stuff, but I cannot deny his classic stuff. It's a shame that you gotta hunt down just bootleg stuff, because basically you can't, aside from YouTube, you can't, unless you got old VHS recordings, you're not going to be able to find some of his stuff,
I think there may be like a DVD or Blu-ray set getting released soon, but
okay, well, that would be very beloved. I think it's interesting seeing him interact with Darcy, but I kind of prefer him talking to what's her name, Honey, his original co-host.
Her male girls. Darcy took a little while to find her stride, but she's definitely found her zone, I think.
Yeah, I think more or less they need to just pick better movies, but that's just my 2 cents.
Well, gotta work with what they can get the rights to.
I guess so. I find it interesting how so many people have always known or found out about him. For those, even if you didn't watch it, it's like he's always been on various blogs and been like a guest contributor or guest critic and he's definitely conquered the convention scene, would host a Q&A for a movie anniversary, so he definitely became better known that way. Renowned is actually the proper term.
I didn't know who he was until I saw him on Monster Vision on TNT. I didn't know about his previous shows.
Yeah, and it's wild. I can't. If I had to go to like the Dallas Morning News or Star Telegram, any other newspaper, I would probably only find like 1 out of 4, maybe 5 out of 40 people who are familiar with him or know the name. It's much like Mystery Science Theater. All 3 hosts, Joel, Mike, and Jonah, have their moments, but they are one of those kinds of people where it's like, it's interesting how some people are more familiar with the show versus have actually remember watching it back in the day, have old VHS tapes collecting dust in their closet. Both those shows use an interesting format is like, you got to be just as rapid and shocking as the movie that you're showing. And I thought that is very inspiring, because we look at all these other filmmakers. We even look at some of the new hosts of Turner Classic Movies, and some of them are still just struggling even during COVID. They have pre-recorded stuff in separate rooms, and it's like, I think you should have done a little extra homework, or a little better delivery on that last part of what you think on the critical reception of this now famous movie, or what we're about to watch tonight.
Yeah, in a way, going back to Joe Bob, shouldn't linger too hard on him, but that's part of why he's a great horror host. That's his style. The research he does is massive, so he always knows what he's talking about with these movies.
Exactly, blood, boobs, body counts. He just knows how trashy and silly some of these movies are, and he's like, "Hey, did you like it? Well, it ain't that bad, is it?" I do have to say, he truly is showing his age. Nothing against elderly people. It's just like, damn. To think that he once had dark hair and.
And on the topic of Darcy, I feel like that's part of where she was struggling at first, because Joe Bob would quip with her like he always did with the male girls, and she'd sit there in this awkward silence. But she's found her vibe, I guess, where like he'll make some remark about her cleavage, and she'll react like, "Yeah, you wish."
Right. I don't do porn anymore now. It's interesting also how, to think that once upon a time we actually did, they would show the mailing address and read letters. It's like, man, it's such a missed part of watching TV now. Who sends letters?
Yeah. Sending the letters and waiting to see, they're going to read mine. They're going to read mine.
Exactly. I have, like, within the last 5 I sent like 1 or 2 letters just to show someone that I loved. I give condolences, or just remember, hey, I still know you exist. It's
all emails and tweets.
Right. Unfortunately, the letters, just because it involves the postage stamps, that's like the only way you can tell someone, hey, I really do legit love you. Either that, or you just gotta have a private sit down with them, give them 20 minutes. So going on to Elvira, she's definitely one I discovered late, but having rewatched 13 Nights, her special where she, it was like originally like on Hulu. Now it's been released on DVD and Amazon Prime. It's a lot of fun because she was given exclusive rights to Full Moon Entertainment and a bunch of other wacky stuff. But I have to say, I really did like how she interrupted movies differently that way. It was very different from how she used to do it, and just the digital interaction and green screen looked pretty good. Still holds up very well. But I'm sure you're more familiar with just back, late '80s, early '90s when it was a thing.
Yeah. And there was kind of the early days of TV. There were horror hosts aplenty, and then the '80s there kind of was a bit of a resurgence.
It was definitely a resurgence. Everybody had to look like Dracula or
Cable, the expansion of cable.
The expansion of cable. There had to be some kind of host. We can't just have Jon Stewart and Dennis Leary on MTV. We got to have someone else. That definitely is a perfect segue. Her and USA Up All Night, just having that kind of Gilbert Gottfried and all these other people who are just comedic and just the most unusual backstories. It's like, man, what kind of job have you not worked at? Just because they're that vapid and quirky. That's why they're just so beloved. It's like, I feel like I'm just as weird as you guys. I love you. So they made themselves relatable that way, but then it's interesting how they kind of they base their look off of not only these kind of hosts, but also just kind of people who look like they're a reject from like the Addams Family, the Munsters, that kind of just old.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for some kind of country-ish horror show where everyone looks like a demented version of the Beverly Hillbillies.
I'm amazed they haven't done that. Actually, they probably have.
They probably have, and it didn't get past. Maybe it was a crappy web series that no one saw. I don't know. Someone in Tennessee, in Arkansas, maybe in South Texas. Yeah, no, it sucks. Not doing it. And are you familiar with cinema insomnia, Mr. Lobo?
I believe I've heard that name, but I haven't really watched it.
And unfortunately for me, he never played on any of the channels, even the antenna channels that I have. And fortunately through Vimeo, you can see a lot of his stuff. And I just commonly would hear people talk. It's like, okay, I have heard that name. I'm getting around to it. Oh, the DVDs are out the wazoo expensive, so I'll try and wait for it to be budgeted. And unfortunately, they would become collector's items right away. So you pretty much would pay twice as more than what you would normally pay for when you got it at the official site or retail. One guy I still am religiously watching him because he just always he'll take even older episodes and then add newer segments to them. Mm-hmm. So to expand the franchise, Svengoolie, are you familiar?
Yep. He's like the last really prominent horror host.
Yeah, exactly. I definitely agree. I know there's plenty of other guys, but seeing how he's recently survived a heart attack, had even Trace Ballou and Frank Conniff from MST just be on there and just interview people at the conventions. Some of these episodes that they're re-showing right now are still from 2016 that you can see them on stuff like Get TV, the Sony channel, and I think that's the one. Either that or it's one of the other ones. But he's interesting in that he just is much like Joe Bob in that he's just a beloved. He's like was working as a critic and then just said, hey, he's technically well, and his case is definitely interesting because he basically had a lot to live up to. He was replacing a previous guy who under that same name, and then he started out as I'm the son of Svengoolie. But now I'm worthy of the crown. Now I am the actual name. I kind of wish he would actually kind of interact or talk a little during the movie, like, oh, brother. But
track style, yeah.
Yeah, or if not that, then just have a few more little extra bumpers, or just maybe have a separate screen just showing his reaction. Someone getting him a martini, saying, "Oh boy, this movie's pretty wacky."
And I got to say, though, I think Svengoolie, in a way, has suffered from gaining more prominence and going national, since MeTV is now a national network.
That's the one. Yeah, it's not Get TV, it's MeTV.
When it was localized, he would show raunchier stuff or bloodier stuff. Not severely so, but definitely compared to what he's showing now. That's because now that they're national, they're very limited in what they can show, and they can only.
Well, it doesn't help that standards have changed. It used to be after 10, it's fair game. As long, you can show anything as long as blood's not in every frame, as long as it's edited in some format, and you can show sleazy or voyeurism, but you can't, obviously you can't show any, thing beyond this and go into the bedroom.
In those days, he was a bit. They did get more elaborate. They had whole skits. They would do things like that. But not so much now. And I think that just being a national network means there's more constraints.
I'm sure there's also a budget too, how many people he can actually come on the show. It's interesting how he's pretty much, I don't mind the people who do his voiceovers. For all I know, I think it's actually him and they just warped his voice a bit. But it's interesting having them react to it. Half the time, the crew members are just giving him a letter or a piece of mail. It's like, jeez. Yeah, I definitely feel like he could get on the DVD Blu-ray market, or at least even do that even more so, just be a commentary. Because remember how that used to be a thing, have a critic like Leonard Maltin or some film historian would be on the commentary track for a movie. I feel like he should do a bit of that. Like he should be a Blu-ray special feature. What does Svengoolie think of this? Where he's really been a thinning.
They could get him on an episode of Riff Tracks.
They should. They really should. I know Kevin Murphy definitely has that. At least I've seen him at a convention, or Bill Corbett.
They've done shows in Chicago. Why not?
Yeah, it's not that far afield, Minneapolis. So I feel like he could definitely make more convention appearances, as well as he could. I just had it. I think where he really is benefiting right now is he'll remix the movie a bit. He'll have his people re-edit it something unintentionally, or just go cut back to the movie while he's illustrating trivia.
Yeah.
When he was doing The Bride of Frankenstein, I was just in a riot because he was just making it look like Frankenstein was doing his own rock heavy metal concert when he was beating on the drums. I was like, perfect. Unfortunately, I think he's kind of more enjoyable on a SpongeBob kind of level, because he just has people just kind of someone off screen talking to him saying, "No, that's not true. No, wrong." But that's it.
Yeah, there's a reason they use a lot of old school Looney Tune sound effects and clips, because that's what they're doing. They're going for the old school Looney Tune effect.
Yeah. Hopefully, he gets a bigger audience and doesn't fade out. But I don't know. How many years has he been doing it? Because it's got to be at least going on 20 now.
He's got to be going on 40, I believe. 40 years.
Oh, shit. Yeah, well, yeah, because he did start out as the son. Yeah, and he was starting out as an intern on other shows, so that makes sense. Okay, well. I hope he at least has 10 more years before he just gives it up.
Who will succeed him?
That is a wonderful question. There's definitely plenty of comedians who would love to be on a local show. But the problem is, I think it does come down just back to the budget. And unfortunately, it's a lot like a radio show where it's like, okay, you get this appearance fee and that's it. Eventually, if management changes, so do you. Other than that, let's talk a little bit about USA Up All Night.
Oh, God, USA Up All Night.
I only caught about it when, I got introduced to GeoCities, and I would see people talk about older shows, but, I was a teen, so I was a wee one.
I've told other people that I've long harbored this really sick fantasy of just kidnapping a bunch of the current, USA Network executives and tying them to chairs and forcing them to watch their televised skeletons in the closet. And by that, I mean, I would make them watch USA Up All Night. I'd make them watch Tattooed Teenage Alien Fighters from Beverly Hills. I'd make them watch Duckman and Weird Science. I'd make them watch all the god-awful cartoons USA has done.
Oh, hell, I'd make them watch some of their bad shows on right now. Like, I'd have them watch the latest, but not as good Season of the Sinner, or another crappy Bernotis knockoff that they're cashing in on. Maybe Queen of the South is like, this is not TV. This is not TV. Chris Lee Knows Best? Good fucking God. Why?
And on a related note to one very unconsidered horror host I'm going to bring up here, when I was still watching WWE on a regular basis because they were on the USA Network. They showed commercials for that damn show all the time. I really, really hate Chris Lee.
Yeah. I just can't do a minute of reality shows. I can maybe do like a minute of like the new Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but that's like it. It's got to have some kind of fun, just party vibe, not serious. If it's serious and guess who's gonna become the bride or inherit this house? It's like, why? What have they done to benefit society? Why do we care?
But on a note of WWE and USA, a horror host would actually be the Undertaker.
Oh, wait, and okay, that's right. And he
officially had his retirement match this past Sunday, and in point of fact, there was a week-long movie marathon back in the '90s on the Sci-Fi Channel, and he was the host.
And did he do a decent job, or was he just kind of like whatever? Easy money.
Well, I'm gonna say it was probably easy money because my understanding is he was injured at the time, so he couldn't really be in the ring. So they needed a way to keep him. They needed a way to keep him busy, and that was a good cross promotion. And my memory of it is basically it was all pre-recorded stuff and just him doing voiceovers with pre-recorded images of him. But
okay, you did tell me this story, but it was a matter of I thought it was kind of a more drastic show, like it was like a bumper. I didn't know it was an actual like it was actually.
It was basically bumpers, but because again, when it's a movie marathon like that, it meant they showed a movie or two at a certain time of the night, and he'd be there to do commentary during the bumpers and things like that. But if I look up images from this on Google, which I'm sure you're doing right now, I just love that freaking bumper graphic. That is like old school Sci-Fi Channel. It looks like something a kid would make in Photoshop.
Oh yeah, back when they were embracing it before it became okay, anyone can do this. It looks pretty shoddy actually. Undertaker Sci-Fi. More or less
maybe like 99 I think they did that.
Oh Jesus. The Theater of Doom is what they called it. Okay,
yep,
so it's both a bumper and kind of a show. The similar thing they kind of do now is on El Rey Network. They have Jake Busey introducing some of the shows, and I'm just like, nothing against him, but it's just what stuff they're giving him to say, kind of lame. My opinion.
Yeah, you need good writers for a good horror host. Again, that's why Rod Serling was so good.
Mm-hmm. And of course, TNT or Sci-Fi just doesn't seem to.
It's not Sci-Fi anymore. It's Sci-Fi.
Yeah, that's true. Rhymes with Fifi. I don't know. Yeah, they haven't caught up with how many films that he did, but the ones according to the guys doing the synopsis who contributed, the movies that were airing were more mainstream stuff like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, and Army of Darkness, and the original Terminator. So, as well as ranging with interviews about Akira, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and The Omen. So, I'm sure someone probably has rare clips of these somewhere, but no telling.
On a VHS tape.
Yeah, not going to even have a DVD transfer. But were you already a fan of the Undertaker? And
of course, ever since I was a kid.
Yeah, just something about him, just
one of my early horror influences.
Yeah, he wasn't just someone who you just tuned into and you just rooted against, or just like
just had a really cool look, a really cool character, and just tickled me silly.
Yeah, seeing how Joe Bob interviewed Roddy Piper, I was always surprised Roddy didn't get on some wacky show or
he did some wacky movies and whatnot. He just never seemed to want to make it a full-time gig.
Yeah, I think he was private. He just wanted to have an actual family time. And it's like, okay, now I'll do this buddy cop movie where I take out the trash, and because Stallone wasn't available. Speaking of which, he started a few movies with Billy Blanks, and I always thought he would have an interesting fitness show, how to train like Billy Blanks.
And actually, someone else on the note of horror hosts who has a bit of a history with WWE and reality shows, Elvira.
And see, I never saw her appear on. She's definitely honored by a lot of those horror hosts, but I never saw, and other horror movie fans and horror actors, but I've never seen her on a wrestling show. But I think I did see a partial article that said she had been.
Like she did that when I was real little, like back in the 80s. That's when she was at her peak.
Okay, so she was like the guest host, like came onto the stage and welcomed. Okay, that's cool. But did she actually pretend to fight one of the divas, or it wasn't that over the top back then?
I don't know if they had women wrestlers at that time, but
yeah, it was probably not.
Seeing. But she did have a reality show, very short-lived in the 2000s. It was The Search for the Next Elvira.
Oh my God!
And a fun little side note: there were a couple of future female wrestlers who showed up on that auditioning.
Wow!
And also, one of the people who auditioned was Darcy, the male girl from Joe Bob.
Wow! So there you go. That was the
connection is there.
Casting call for that. Jeez. So, how could you even replace Elvira?
And particularly the story of how she basically fell backwards into being Elvira is really good. I'm assuming you know
that. Is that in? I know she has like 2 new documentaries that are out, and is that one of the ones that she discusses it on, or?
I'm actually not aware of that. I just know the story is that she was part of the Groundlings theater group, a very legendary theater group.
I did know about the Groundlings. Yeah, the Groundlings had everybody from Ryan Stiles to
Paul Rubin and.
Yes, Paul Rubens. I did for my improv class. I did a special thing on him. It's like he, Taron Killen, some other less talked about SNL cast members who are underrated.
But she was part of the Groundlings when I forget. I think the name was Vampira. Like a previous horror host had to give the job up, and she auditioned and got it. And
yes.
She thought that now she had a paying gig while she pursued being a serious actress thanks to her Groundling connections, little knowing that, no, you've just found yourself a lifetime gig.
Right. And it's so weird seeing, you look back at some stuff from the 90s, she would guest star as the Elvira character. One episode is this weird, very bizarre episode of Nash Bridges that has a BDSM crime ring. It's not graphic, but it's one of those. Is like, why is that person pinned up to a wall wearing exotic clothing? But yeah, she briefly appears on the episode, but it's so wild they credit her as her actual name, Cassandra Peterson. So I was like, okay, but you're playing Elvira, so
she's such an interesting case where anytime she does an interview or something, it's almost always as Elvira, but she'll still get credit as her real self.
Yeah, the last 5 times I've seen her listed at Texas Frightmare, it's weird. It's like it would always be half and half. Like the flyer would say Elvira, but the main website would just say her actual Cassandra Peterson, what if that's her stage name or actual legit name, whatever it is, and then just say, best known as being, talk show host Elvira and all these other movies she did that everyone forgets she was in.
Being part of the Groundlings and a friend of Paul Rubin, she probably didn't want to fall in the trap he did, where he basically had to become Pee Wee Herman, and it consumed his life.
Yeah, he got depressed and brief scandal, so then it was like, okay, yeah, you got to take a break.
His way of dealing with depression was to choke the snake in an adult theater.
Yep. No, not something you need. And I think that's the other thing, too. These agents are so busy just being the equivalent of a fixer, except not illegally, where they're just kind of just there to clean up your problem. It's like, no, what you should be doing is actually earning your paycheck and actually telling me what I should be doing with my career.
That's true too.
Unfortunately, they won't do that. It seems like ethics and just, hey man, I'm thinking of you, even though I'm just, working for your firm. It'd be good to have someone just that vetting process go a little better, and unfortunately it just seems like whoever's available or has a connection, you're going with them in a story. Out of going back briefly to MST3K, out of the free hosts, I really don't understand why Jonah, Joel, Mike, all those guys, we're still having to compare them. They're so different. They never intended to copy one another. they knew that the heat was on, and they had to quickly abandon what they weren't good at in favor of what they were good at. You know, Joel was a prop comedian. Mike is a snarky, making fun of everyone's in Odyssey, dry humor guy, and then Jonah's a mixture of both absurdities. You know, because Joel was producing his reincarnation, and was more familiar with Mike's form, so you got that kind of. I would actually be interested to see if that ever comes back, who would be the next host, because I think they could definitely get some other more obscure but underloved comedians who have a good sense of humor. And unfortunately, it seems to be kind of a boxing match, just like who's the best Doctor Who, Batman, or Sherlock Holmes. It's like, oh my god, no, it's not even that close. Not even. It's not even who's the next James Bond. No, it's not.
It's like Tim Curry and Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise the Clown. There is no better. They're both great, just different ways.
Okay, that is a good parallel. It's like it's a different version. I mean, at this rate, more realistically, you're going to get, I like this movie version better but I prefer this version of the character, so and there's nothing wrong with the acting. So it's like, with this, I mean, if they're going to find another host, they definitely need to find some comedians who are, again, just quick on their feet. They're just as much a movie buff as they are just ready to go up and be a stand-up on the stage. They can be a little gentle as opposed to foul-mouthed, So you need a lot of that. And unfortunately, hosting just seems to be just kind of again, I'm in it for the money, or I have a lot of attention, but I have no real credentials. So as a result, I'm inviting all these famous people on, but I'm not really asking them any good questions, unless my writers give me something good this week. And I really hope they can do another kind of these shows instead of just kind of milk it all. So it'll be interesting to see if any regular channels come up with something new. It seems like I have this one antenna channel in my local city that kind of just plays shit from that's been playing since 2014. It's like it's on repeat automatically. It's just some old stuff. There's one channel that used to be my UPN affiliate is playing shit from '04, like old talk shows with stand-up comedians, and I'm like, this is very depressing, because either half these comedians have lost significant weight, like Anthony Anderson, or they are dead, or this whole show is just not funny. No one's asking anything relevant. This is just a time killer at 6 a.m. that originally played, and unfortunately is replaying now. Someone still has it in the vault. I hope they can access a bunch of other more recent movies. Cable is definitely the way to go on these, especially. It's actually really saddening to me that El Rey, with all the movies they're playing, they could not actually have any creativity. It's like, why don't you get a host who is actually pretty awesome instead of just having all these other stupid reality shows on there in between uncut movies? If you had to vouch for a channel or even a streaming service, who's a host that you would contact, and what platform would you want to put it on?
Well, since we're talking horror hosts, Shudder, definitely, I enjoy that platform.
All right.
It can be a little frustrating because they're inconsistent with their content, but they can only get the rights for certain things for so long.
All right. I would bet you that you could definitely. Who's a comedian that comes off to you as like a really big, just retro fan? Like, just he was always going to anniversary screenings. They would be that well informed, and mix it in with their comedy style.
Well, actually, I wasn't going to say a comedian. Actually, he's a YouTuber, Dr. Wolfula.
Oh, okay.
He's a horror host in his own right, and I think given his own show, he'd probably flourish with it.
Okay, even cooler, and hell, if Lorne Michaels can use that as how he casts future, cast members of SNL, that would be cool if they did that more, just more shows cast based on whatever web YouTubers they can find. Instead of, definitely don't have a repeat of Lily Singh, where the talk show host is the YouTuber is controversial, get on everyone's nerves, not funny. So it just makes you wonder.
That's why I mentioned Dr. Wolfield and Shudder, because he focuses entirely on horror movies and he does reviews of them. And I think he used to be all funny. He would just make sarcastic remarks. Now he really goes in depth and analyzes the movies and shares their history, kind of a Joe Bob type thing. But
you need that. You really do need that. I think you could definitely find something good with Decker Shadow. He's another YouTuber who just has always posted outrageous reviews, and he's done a banged up job just by using just the most simplicity. He's just talking to the camera and he's giving his shocked reaction as he's finding out something shocking about the movie. Mostly before he cuts to a clip of it. And you definitely need those kind of guys who can time it. They realize this is a business, but it's also a practice session. Don't just, make this shit up as you go along. Don't deliver lines that just feel very over scripted. Like you have been saying them 5 different times, and then as a result, it stopped being as funny. So you didn't have, the delivery wasn't as strong. Say again, sorry.
I said you need to be witty. You need to be able to improvise.
Yeah. Well, and exactly the timing is what it is all about. So, if they could find someone else from YouTube and Vimeo, and I would definitely be keen on even starting our own show, because I know we all have some kind of degree of creativity. I would be fine with even people film their own segments and people edit it all together, and we have someone in a creature costume who introduces the movie and we go from there. Kind of like how there's been a lot of, because put it on Amazon Prime and a bunch of other places. It seems like there's been a lot of people who have more or less so just kind of always been pretty good at, shall we say, taking, much like doing their own independent riffs or shit talking over a walkthrough of a video game. I think they can definitely go the extra mile. It's like, okay, what are some movies that are all on the internet, that are all free to use? Obviously, we're going to do Haunting. If not The Haunting, we're going to do, what's the Vincent Price one? House on Haunted Hill. Well, then we'll do some of these other ones. And look for some other just obscure ones that were made, before the censor. And that's the other thing, too. A lot of these movies would be older, so they'll be easier to come across. And because that's pretty much what you got to do. You got to definitely do what all these other guys are doing. Except instead of doing the secondary part where you get a movie that you can license, but only for a limited time, definitely just is like, hey, this movie's on all these video channels for a reason, because it's free to use. You can use it. And I don't know if anyone could ever do a riffing segment of a movie as well, but if you're definitely going to do some kind of horror host, then yeah, you got to be able to have a green screen. You got to at least just have a portion of your garage that you design and just make it look like a lair of some sort. Here I am on this statue-ish throne or some shit. And it could even be, you could even tie in the technical aspect of it into the whole premise. You could have the guy just saying, here in my, you could have a mic, but a microphone that you dress up as like some kind of magical globe, like like a witch or a gypsy would use. That would be a lot of fun. There you go. Have a pod. There's definitely a lot. I'm surprised more people haven't attempted this more. I just figured that they're so busy doing all these other movies, and it does take a lot of brainstorming, which you do have to make serious time for. So I don't know. I would be down to do it though. So, Mr. Ryan, where can we find you on the interwebs?
As always, the Nightmare Nerd can be found on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. I'm writing articles for House of Tortured Souls and now for Behind the Screams on their website. So thank you all for liking and following. Eat, drink, and be scary and enjoy.
Especially on the former the Tortured Souls, man. They are getting into some really demented kind of movies to talk about now.
Yeah, I haven't written for them in a while just because I've been so busy. I really want to get back into it.
There's something about reviewing and leaving a review that's just very nourishing.
Indeed. Nothing like taking frustrations on a movie.
Right? It's like, what the hell were you thinking?
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All? Sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time. Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We may talk about video games,
Music.
Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Yes.
I am the master storyteller
Yes.
of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers,
Yes.
the Google Play,
Yes.
Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ. We
Ah.
gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair say
Ah. Ah.
all
Yeah.
that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we're going to end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be a
did you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-last plot holes of gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy. At eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zemenov. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zemenov, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zemenov, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zemenov.
Hi, everybody. It's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything: pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant, 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The 2 lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VD Clinic Pod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VD Clinic Pod. Or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
We now continue with our program.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up